Here, the question is asking me, what is the writer's attitude towards incidental loma intervention? So basically, intervention that you're doing for incidental loma, what is the writer's attitude regarding that? Okay, is it positive? Is it negative? That's what I think anytime I'm reading a paragraph to identify a writer's attitude, because if it is negative, then I can identify how negative. If it is positive, then I can identify how positive it is, right? So reading the paragraph, let's see. So the question becomes, so one of the stratification, risk stratification is basically categorizing or dividing patients or groups on the basis of how many risk factors they have, whether or not they have risk factors. So the question is about risk stratification, categorizing patients of each incidental based on what? Based on the risk factors that patients have, based on the clinical context they have, and the image morphology as well. Okay, so that's what the writer is focusing on. A dense, and look at the language here, a dense speculated pulmonary nodule on this from a 58-year-old heavy smoker. So here the writer is using a real life example to prove something. Remember, whenever they talk about any kind of real patients, real cases, anything, any real example is always going to be used to prove a point that the writer is trying to make. And early on, the writer was trying to make a point that, listen, these kinds of things like risk stratification is the main thing here. That's what we need to do on the basis of these. For each incidental loma, we need to do that. So that's basically the main thing. And then it continues and they says that there is likely to be malignant and warrants intervention. Here it is definitely going to be a problematic thing. And as a result, it warrants, that means it requires, it justifies doing more intervention there, correct? But then he uses the term however. Now here he is changing the opinion by saying that an ill-defined, that means poorly defined soft obesity in a 30-year-old non-smoker undergoing CTPA would most likely be benign. Here, the comparison is very clear. Here it is going to be benign, not malignant, but benign, and intervention may cause harm. So the writer has given us two examples, two real life examples of case studies. And in one example, he shows how something can be, how the risk factors, for example, this person is a heavy smoker and 58-year-old, the age is also a risk factor. Then we have the old heavy smoking as well, which is also a risk factor, could lead to something malignant, and that means we require more intervention here. But the other case where the age is reduced, and at 30-year-old, you don't really have that many serious problems. And then the person is also a non-smoker, by the way, and the person is then going this kind of investigation, they're probably going to be benign. Whatever finding you find, that means it is not going to be very serious, and the intervention, further investigation, for the treatment, whatever you do, it will probably cause harm. So it is making up the point that, listen, you need to categorize based on each incidental loma. You need to consider the patient risk factors like the smoking and the non-smoking, the clinical context, and the image morphology as well. Yes. So I understand the writer is trying to show us that, listen, this is something that we must do. Now, the writer is optimistic about its ability to detect early. There's nothing as such which is discussed that the writer is very happy that, incidental intervention, incidental loma intervention is going to detect early something. The writer is not at all happy about that. That is not even mentioned, or it is not going to be our answer. Then answer option B says that the writer's attitude is skeptical. Now, I'm quite interested in this word skeptical, because I didn't necessarily find anything very negative, anything very skeptical, but maybe they are using this term and changing the meaning in some way. Let's check. The writer's attitude is skeptical about its consequences. Here, the focus is not on consequences. They have mentioned that here the intervention is needed. Here, they have shown how intervention is not needed because it can cause harm, but it is on the causing harm, which can be considered a consequence, is only given in one's answer option. Sorry, not answer option, but rather in just examples, in this one example's little sentence, the focus is more on how you need to divide patient into groups depending on the individual factors they have, individual context, and individual testing they require. So I'm not happy about skeptical about its consequences. Instead, what I would do is I would not select it right now, but look at other answer options in the hope of finding a better answer option. The writer's attitude is cautious. I can consider cautious because cautious means that you are analytical about something, you are carefully considering something before going through with one action or decision. And the writer's attitude is cautious about the need for intervention. I like this because the writer's attitude is very, very considerate, very careful whether or not you need intervention. Do you even need it? So you need to categorize the risk stratification you need to do in order to figure out based on each incidentaloma, based on the patient risk factors, based on the clinical context and the image morphology, whether or not this is a good idea, intervention is a good idea or not. Because in some cases, it is required. In other cases, not so much. So that makes sense. I like answer option C more than answer option B, which is why I can eliminate it. Now let me look at D. Maybe that's better. Now, the writer's attitude is dismissive of its effectiveness. When it says that its effectiveness, that means incidental loma intervention. Answer option A and D are two answer options which have not been discussed because the effectiveness of this has not been mentioned. So this clearly means that my answer option C has to be the right answer, since this is the one which talks about the writer being cautious, which the writer is saying that this is the question that we need to do, and risk stratification is something we need to do, and about the need, whether or not it is required, just like here. This may cause harm, this may warrant investigation. So that's why answer option C should be the right answer.